Welcome back to Midlife by Design. I hope this week has you wondering what the hell day it is and letting your house be a mess and letting the Christmas presents and all of the holiday detritus just hang out for a little too long because you are treating yourself to just plain rest. I hope that's what you're doing this week. And I hope that as you're listening to this podcast, which will help you get out of perimenopause purgatory, I hope that you decide to join us for a masterclass that my retreat partners, Dr. Johanneke Kodde and Maggie Thomas, and I will all be hosting on Sunday, the January 5th at 11:30 Eastern Time in the morning. And our episode today is actually a little kind of teaser around the idea that we've created of a perimenopausal roadmap, a midlife renewal roadmap for you. And how do you navigate this phase of life? And we're going to talk about the elements of the roadmap today in this episode. And if you really love what you hear and you want to dive deeper and understand how you can kind of create your own roadmap, then join us for the masterclass, which the link will be in the show notes. So I am your host, Lori Lisai, human design teacher and midlife coach, here to help you use human design to shed others' expectations and be who you came here to be. Let's dive in. Welcome back to Midlife by Design. Today I have with me Dr. Johanneke Kodde and Maggie Thomas, my beautiful and amazing retreat partners. And we have an amazing episode for you that's going to help you get out of perimenopause purgatory with a specific roadmap. So we're going to dive into some of those ideas. But first, I just want to say, welcome, ladies. Thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. So for the women who are tuning in, most of them are feeling any one of, a number of the 80-ish symptoms of perimenopause on a regular basis, whether that be exhaustion because they're not sleeping, or the stereotypical hot flashing, or they could really care less if they ever have sex again, or they're itchy and bitchy. And our aim is to help them because modern medicine is lagging in women's health in general. And we have kind of a unique way of looking at this sort of phase of life as more of an initiation. And so while all of these physical symptoms may be a royal pain in the ass, and other pains, other places, they are also invitations for us. So, Johanneke, what are some of the main symptoms or problem areas that women are coming to you with? Like what lands them in your office to visit, to even start having a conversation about whether they're in menopause or perimenopause or not?
That's a good question. Many different reasons. They're coming at a younger age. Now they're coming into their mid-40s or early 40s sometimes because there is more awareness about it. A question which they are very confused about and which a lot of doctors are very confused about is the mental health changes. I don't feel myself. I don't feel I can cope. I'm getting angry. I've got emotional fluctuations. And is this my mental health, or is this the menopause or the perimenopause? And that is a question that can be quite hard to answer. And they have often maybe been prescribed antidepressants, which are helping a little bit. And they may not have the hot flashes or the obvious symptoms yet. And they are as confused as the doctors that are trying to help them. So you have to really ask lots of questions and get really clear on what the background to people's story is. And often reassure them that it could be a bit of both, but often these things go hand in hand. And no, they're not going mad. No, they're not losing. They might be losing their shit, but that's okay. So to me, the first thing is often reassurance that you're not going mad. You're not going crazy. You're not losing the plot, as we say in England, but you are going through it. No, and that's okay. So that's the first thing. And then it depends on the severity of the symptoms and how many sleepless nights and how on the floor they are with their life and this and what their responsibilities are that they can't immediately get out of. And that's where we might say, have some hormone replacement for a little while, get you back on track. And then let's see what else is going on and what we can work with. So that's one way of kind of looking at it. And sometimes it's the other way around when they don't want the hormones, or actually they are so low and so down and so really have been in this really dark place for such a long time that maybe I would start them on some antidepressants. So that's often a difficult one to gauge, but I don't feel that you can go wrong with either with trying something and just give it some time and go, well, we'll see what happens, but come back, we'll reevaluate. And at the same time, start thinking about all those things that are trying to come up for your attention. Because that's the piece, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Why is all this stuff coming up? Well, there's a lot more going on in the background. Your body's changing and it needs to change.
Thank you. And speaking of mental health, and for me specifically, brain fog has been a pretty significant symptom. I struggle with the word symptom because there's so many of them for this phase of life, and it just feels like, breathing should be on there if you're a midlife woman. But the brain fog is real, and this is a perfect example. I hopped right into our questions and starting the interview and forgot to say, hey, this is a little bit about my guests today in case you haven't listened to previous pods. So let me hit the pause button and rewind and say, okay, Johanneke and then Maggie, can you just tell us a quick little bit about yourselves? And then we're going to hop timelines back to where we are right now and continue on.
Of course. And that's fine. This is one thing the menopause or perimenopause makes you do. You become very creative and you start to improvise. And I think that's underestimated, and that's what life's all about anyway. So I am a medical doctor. I'm a GP in the UK, which means a family doctor, which I've been for nearly 20 years. And the last couple of years, I have been concentrating much more on having my own business where I do holistic health, which means I have an hour with people and I have interwoven psychological approaches, but also spiritual approaches with the medical expertise that I have. So there's different hats I have. I still work as a doctor, and in that capacity, I would be prescribing medication sometimes. If I do my holistic work, I would actually spend all the time talking about what's going on in your life, what are all your responsibilities, what are all your emotional things that you've been through so far, how are your relationships, how are you conditioned. I mean, the list is endless of things I would go through because I think those are far more relevant than they're giving credit for really in the conventional system. So that's me.
All right. Thank you. Mags.
So I'm in Ontario, Canada, and I have an extensive background in yoga and facilitating yoga teacher trainings. I also do human design readings and host retreat. And essentially, I help to inspire and empower women and support them along that journey to finding themselves and finding that clarity of what is ideal for them or what is in alignment for them. And just doing it from a place of authenticity, really. I feel like I've toggled between the traditional model or the linear path and the non-linear path for the past several decades. And now I've fully accepted that the non-linear is for me. Mm-hmm. And just really embracing all of that.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And sorry, I missed that at the beginning, but thanks for filling in the holes. And Maggie, I'm wondering if back to the conversation about perimenopause, I'm curious if you would be willing to share a little bit about your personal experience navigating perimenopause and what have the major struggles been for you?
Yeah. So, I mean, for me, I feel like it kind of hit around 41, 42-ish. I think what really catapulted me into perimenopause was that I was in a burnout state in 2022, because I was not only running the yoga business, I also had a medical practice and 2 children and all the things. And I just couldn't keep spinning the plates, and I was totally wiped. And I think that really flipped the switch for me, for my body to like put me into perimenopause, because I started to notice the weight gain and the hair changing. My hair was falling out like crazy, which would stress me even more.
Mm-hmm.
Like that vicious cycle. I would get some night sweats, but not any of the hot flashes or anything. I haven't hit that yet. Also the like just random body odor that would show up. And I was like, what? That's me. So just starting to notice that. And I remember feeling very overwhelmed and frustrated by all of it, because I didn't have any education in it. It was just kind of hit, and no one was talking about it. So I started to take my own deep dive. Like I started seeing a naturopath and like went down that rabbit hole for a while. And then I saw some functional health medicine practitioners and did a lot of testing and just started to learn like, how are the hormones working? What is happening? And I've really started to understand like, okay, for my body specifically, there's like a dominance in estrogen, but then I have a low progesterone. That's like the main piece that's missing. Mm-hmm. And so starting to slow down was key, because I was constantly pushing. Like I was doing CrossFit at the time and like pushing like 5 days a week, trying to get rid of the excess weight that I had gained, because I was like, hey, like I can't accept this. Like I was pushing and pushing and pushing to the point where my body just kept getting injured, trying to tell me to stop. And then finally I stopped, because the practitioners I was seeing were like, no, you need to slow down. You need to change the types of exercises you're doing. You need to walk instead of run. You need to do some resistance training, but not every day. Like allow your body to rest. And that was so hard for me to receive, like so hard to receive. It took me quite a bit, but now I fully have embraced that and really started syncing things with my cycle as well. Like when I'm, a week before my period, I'm definitely doing less of the resistance training or less of the intense workouts. And then giving my body time to rest, and also starting to nourish it with different foods at different times. And I'm starting to notice, like that things are starting to balance out. But even that, like that balancing period, it takes a long time. And I think that we expect things to happen overnight, and that's a hard pill to swallow. But I feel it's a lot of it is a trial and error, and everything is so different for each body. So it's like attuning to your body and asking, okay, is this going to support me, or is this? And I went through that with like taking different supplements and trying different things. So I think it's very unique type of protocol for each individual person. So tuning in is key.
Yeah. As I was listening to you, I was thinking about your human design, of course, and, just hearing the 6 line kind of coming through there, and the experimentation and trying things and seeing if they stick. And I think it really is so very individual. And Johanneke, you kind of alluded to this as well, as just the variety of issues that women are showing up with. It feels like this long laundry list of possible symptoms, and every woman has a little bit of this and a little bit of that and her own special recipe, right? And I think that what's important is understanding that whatever that recipe is, it is a call for change. And it looks different in each and every one of us. However, the common thread is that the problem isn't you, it's this it's this life that you're living, these invisible rules that you're living by, and the expectations that you need to be nice all the time, be a good girl, stay busy, be productive, be the best mom, be the best wife, be the good friend, all of these things. And so all of these symptoms help to highlight where those expectations are no longer serving us and where we need to make some significant shifts. So I'm so glad, Maggie, that you shared some of the things that worked for you in terms of your experimenting and making changes. And Johanneke, I'm curious if you would like to share a little bit about what has helped you, what has served you during this phase.
Yeah. So what comes up for me is that as women, I think as humans even, what we still seem to be fed is this narrative that you're going to get there if you try harder. And for me, the message that I've received is try less hard. It's not, and the rest of the message I'm giving to every woman I meet to go through it is actually, no, you need to rest more, slow down and stop trying so hard because you're beating yourself up in some way or another. So what happened with me, it all kickstarted in my situation, my daughter becoming unwell and developing Tourette's and severe anxiety, and then having to come out of school. It was very severe. She was 12 at the time. She just came into her first cycle after she came out of school, and we had to be at home more. We had to really rethink our life. And then I somehow got wind of or started to hear about human design. So I looked up my own design and then looked up my family's design. Turns out I'm a projector, which wasn't a huge surprise to me because I've always worked part-time and I've always kind of known I've always seen for people what they needed, but I haven't always waited to be invited to tell them about it. But the good news as a doctor is when people come to you asking you for help, then you have more or less an invitation. So that's how I use it in my job. But then when I realized my daughter's a manifestor, but she was never angry. She was always nice as pie. She was keeping the peace at all costs. So I started to learn that she was twisting herself in lots of ways to just keep the peace and nobody would thwart her. Whereas in my other son, her younger brother, is also a manifestor and he was always angry. So to me, finding human design was one of the key pieces there. It's now just over 4 years ago and my daughter's doing fine, by the way. And I have changed my career and we've changed how we parent. I've learned human design and really dove into that. And I've also learned that I was still in my head. I was pretty in tune with my patients. I was always able to listen, but I thought I was using my mind. Turns out I was using my intuition probably as well, but I wasn't really using my body for information. I wasn't, because I've got a defined spleen and I have emotional authority. And I wasn't using my body to guide me. I was still in that idea that you get your information from your brain, really, your mind. So then that was one of the massive learnings is, decision making happens in the body, not in the mind, but your mind can observe. And I love observing and analyzing and, concepts and all of that. So for me, I went through years of, where am I? What am I doing? What's going on in my life? Am I getting it right? And then human design helped me enormously. Getting into my body helped me. Astrology helped me. And then kind of all these more subconscious, unconscious concepts like archetypes and going to women's circles helped me and going on retreats and meeting other women. So yeah. There's lots of things that have helped me along the way. And now, and I thought I was through it all, but I'm not even 50. So of course I'm not. There's more to come.
Absolutely. Well, thank you both for sharing your experience. And I think part of what makes us such a dynamic trio here is that we do all have experience to be able to share with the women that we're serving. And what we have all come to separately has been the realization that getting through this phase and learning to make it a phase where we thrive and come into our authenticity is about way more than just, going to the doctor and getting HRT. And not to knock HRT at all or to say that that is not helpful, because absolutely it can be, for sure. However, it's not the only thing that you need during this time to support yourself and to truly make this your best life. So I talked about at the top of the episode this idea of a roadmap for this phase, Wild Woman's Roadmap. And we believe that it encompasses a few different things. Human design, definitely one. We are all very invested in human design, and we'll talk a little bit more about it in a second. Embodiment practices, incorporating the elements, using archetypes, and community. So as 5 different kind of components of a roadmap that we feel are essential elements to moving through this phase in a way that truly supports you. So human design, if you're listening to this podcast, you've been hearing me talk about it for a while, but it's just a system for self-awareness, essentially, when you boil it right down to its essence. And I think, Johanneke, what you were talking about in terms of that helping you with embodiment, I think that for me, that was one of the game changers as well, is understanding that your body is so much more than, this vessel that is having these physical symptoms, or, something that you have to worry about what it looks like for, exterior praise and acceptance. It's a tool that is here to guide you if you can tune into it and understand what it's telling you. So all of these symptoms are just ways of communicating with you. And embodiment is super, super important during this phase of life. So Maggie, I love the example of the CrossFit and going and working out and trying these ways that probably worked when you were younger. It's like we naturally fall back into the old ways, kind of like, well, this is what I used to do when I had to drop 5 pounds, so this is what I'm going to do now. And your story of how it just didn't work. So I'm curious if you could talk a little bit more about your experience with human design and embodiment as like a way that that has helped you kind of come into your authenticity.
Yeah, human design has helped me to unlearn some things,
Mm-hmm.
right? I feel like a lot of it is an unlearning or a deconditioning. And just like you said, with the whole fitness aspect of things, it was more like letting go of what I did when I was younger and embracing this new phase and how my body wanted to respond. And it literally, when I was doing the CrossFit, I was getting fatter. Like I would do the body scans and I would cry because the numbers would show that like my body was totally rejecting it. And I was there 5 days a week and pushing. And like even the fitness instructors were like, we don't know what to say. Doing all the things. And yet my body was like screaming no. So I finally listened to it. And that was definitely a hard pill to swallow. But in terms of starting to understand my human design, it was just tapping into like, when I'm met with resistance or challenge, it's a huge signpost for me that I'm in a misalignment. It's like something is not going the way that it's intended to. And so when I'm in a place of things flowing and easeful, then that's a great signpost that I'm on track. So that's always been really huge for me. And now I see it all the time. I have this self-awareness around it, that when something is challenging or I'm not getting the results I want, then I need to come back and like revisit what's going on and maybe do some kind of internal unblocking to something or revamp how I'm approaching something. And so that was like one big piece of human design that's really helped me understand. And then also another piece was like, so in our family, all of us have defined sacrals. So we call it like the battle of the sacrals. And so just understanding that was huge because I couldn't understand how there was so much anger and frustration in this house all the time. And I was like, what is it? Like, and so starting to understand our human design and recognizing that we all had the same defined center and that we all want our own things. And when we don't get them, that will be met with frustration or anger. It was huge. It's like life changing. So that piece of human design has always stayed with me. The validation that human design gave to me to allow me to step into that nonlinear path and really embrace it. It was like giving me permission and validation to be myself. And then in terms of embodiment practices, like I really do think that they're interconnected. Like you said, Johanneke, like human design is understanding that we take in information or through our mind, but the processing and the decision making comes from the body. And that coincides with everything I've learned in yoga. And then human design just like amplifies it.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you so much.
I will say this, the one thing that I've noticed, because Johanneke mentioned it too, is just about kind of doing less or not working so hard. I've come to realize that consistency is more valuable than working hard. Like so instead of doing resistance training every single day, and I'd always be like that all or nothing kind of mentality, it's more if I can be consistent 3 or 4 days a week, I think that that's the way my body is responding much better because allowing that time for rest in between.
Love it. And consistency, I think, takes on a different meaning too. Like consistency is more around following your consistent energy versus days on the calendar or like some kind of checklist. Yeah. Okay, so let's talk briefly about the elements, which is another component of our perimenopause roadmap. And let's just focus in on one particular element. And Maggie, I'm going to lob this one to you again. What is your most favorite element that you've been working with recently?
Oh, so I'm going to say the water element is the one that I've been working with the most recently. So this ties into your sacral center, and it's all about your life force, your sensuality, that fluidness, that feminine energy. And that's been really calling to me lately, is just allowing that to be unleashed in a sense.
And when you think about working with elements, how do you intentionally work with it?
That's a really great question. So there's different ways. I mean, like if I'm looking at the water element, it can be like there's so many things that tie to it. So I can play with the sacral center itself and tie in elements of like orange color because the orange is connected to the sacral center, but then bringing in water with that, right? Like combining the two. So maybe being around water, taking more baths, having the waterfall in your environment that you can hear the water. Or I have a water chime that's like attuned to the sound of water that I'll use just to help me reconnect with it. There's certain crystals that you can use that kind of tie in the elements of water. So there's like so many different things in terms of things that you can kind of bring into your environment that can help you tap into that center. And then there's different movements. So if we went into like yoga movements that can help support the sacral center, because your sacrum and the navel area is really about this pumping action. So doing this little pumping action to actually get your cerebral spinal fluid. So again, fluid, water, pumping up your spine and into the base of your neck, like working through that type of movement. And certain fluid, like almost rhythmic type of dance can even help to get things moving. We don't want that stagnation, right? Like, so think of it as like water or even energy kind of moving through your body.
Yeah. Okay. I love it. And when you said pumping and the sacral, I just, my brain went there. And then you started dancing around like, like pole dancing. I'm like,
it doesn't have to be pole dancing. It can be, but it is.
Well, that's the thing is it should be. Who did we meet at Imiloa? Debbie.
Oh, Debbie,
right?
Debbie.
Our friend Debbie. We're giving Debbie a shout out. Debbie is all about embodying the feminine and embracing your sexy no matter what age you are, right? And and I mean crawling around on the floor and breaking out all of the stripper moves just in in an attempt to like reconnect with that sexy, sassy part of you.
A lot of the times we're so inhibited by conditioning again from society, right? To be the good girl, to like not show that part of ourselves. But you'll come to this time, especially now, I'm feeling it, like there's like, it wants to come out, and not in a, I'm going to say dirty kind of way, but more in a sensual, sexy, seductive kind of way.
Johanneke, did you have anything that you wanted to add about elements?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
When my daughter was home from school for a while, we then decided to get a dog because we always thought we were always working and the kids were at school. We didn't feel that it was the right time for it. So then we thought we could have a puppy. I was still working as a doctor, so I was still going to work, but we did have one of us always at home. So we got a puppy, and then obviously with the dog comes dog walking. So suddenly I found myself out in the woods every day with a puppy in the mud, in the rain. And in Cornwall where I live, it's very green. Everything kind of it's like a temperate rainforest. So it's not warm, but it is still, it doesn't get very cold. It doesn't snow. It doesn't get very frosty. So there is always ivy growing. There's always moss. There's always pretty green. So even though the deciduous trees will lose their leaves, you will still have green, evergreens and things growing. So I'd go into these woods and I would kind of curse them at the same time. I would try and connect with the soil, I don't know, there was something very kind of wintry, soily, earthy about the whole thing. And I think and at the time I was like trying to sing songs. I can't even sing very well, but I was trying to like have little meditations in the woods, and I felt like I was not getting anything back. It felt like I was trying very hard to do this spiritual connection thing with the woods, and it wasn't really working. But in hindsight, what it did, it was really grounded me. It was really useful and helpful. And so to me, because I see, I use kind of more the Celtic wheel, the seasonal wheel with the elements. And for me, so the winter for me is the earth element. And it is also obviously death and rebirth. It's going into this rest phase. And for me, this is an element which in our whole culture is not honored enough. Wintering, resting, having time out, stopping, particularly over the winter solstice and Christmas is actually a time of staying at home, lighting a fire, which is the fire element, but actually not pushing through, not having the daylight all the time, not getting very busy. So really honoring the wintering, honoring the rest, because we forget at our peril that our bodies only really sustain and nourish and replenish and repair themselves when we are in rest. So I've come to really appreciate the value of that, and also all those hidden layers of stress that we have because we're trying to be like how we ought to be. We're trying to keep up with our previous selves, even though our bodies are changing and we have temporarily less energy. And we try to keep that job going or keep all the children, keep kind of just mothering, because it's the earth element is also, you could say the mother earth. It's that mothering. So I quite like to make sure that there is always time and attention to the darkness, the rest, the soil, the earth, I think, as a part of it. And it helps. And all these elements actually come back wherever you can place them anywhere. Because water also is the element of it, emotions. And that's the other one I've tapped into more, is emotional authority. Oh, I thought I was stoic. I thought I was, because I'm Aquarius and I'm a projector and I've got a lot of air, I can actually see the bigger perspective. So I thought that was how I was, completely forgetting that I actually a very emotional person. Once I got into my body, I was like, oh, actually, I can feel an emotional flow all the time. And there's passion and there's fire. So yeah, I don't know, that's kind of weaving all the elements in. But I think the earth element for me was the one that grounded me and I got much more connection with. And now I think I'm probably better able to remind everybody, and particularly women in midlife, that, rest can be really yummy as well, can be delicious, and allowing yourself to rest can be great. And,
so rest is an act of rebellion in many ways. And it feels to me like this phase of life is the perfect phase for us to come to that realization, where we've been following the paths that have been laid out for us like good little girls for many, many years. And finally, we just get to this point where our bodies literally go through this shedding, and our brains change, where we're able to say, we don't give a fuck anymore about those things. And my body needs to rest. Therefore, I am going to rest. And if that is the act of rebellion that, it is for all of the other people around me, then so be it. They will need to learn to adjust and figure out how to do this thing without me, running 1,000 miles an hour or whatever. So we've talked about human design and embodiment and a bit about the elements. And I want to touch on archetypes as another component of our ideal roadmap for learning to thrive in perimenopause. So Johanneke, I'm going to toss this one to you, a question about working with the wild woman archetype in particular. What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, I love the wild woman archetype. And let's be clear, archetypes are just different ways of looking at something. So they are just, because you can have God and goddess archetypes. There's so many ways of using archetypes. So they're effectively just a part of who we are in a certain phase. And we just look at them temporarily to learn about ourselves. So that doesn't mean you're going to be in that phase forever. It's just a way of looking at something and getting a little bit deeper into that identity. So what most people know is the maiden, mother, crone triad. But we are missing a phase. We are missing, after the mothering comes the wild woman, the phase of really breaking free from that mothering role. You can't just go from mothering to wise woman crone, because those two are so far removed in a way. There is a phase in between where the wild woman needs to break free. And it could be, and it can even liken it to a new whole death and rebirth and phoenix rising and whatever you want to call it. But it means that the loss of estrogen, the estrogen that keeps you in the mothering phase, if you lose that, you really start to think, shit, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to cook dinner every day. I don't want to, mother everybody around me, whether it is, at work or at home. And it's deliberately doing that so that you start to get a little bit angry, and that you start to get a little wilder, and that the wild woman is there. It's also a bit like the season of autumn or fall, where you start to shed and let go of certain things. And it gets a bit wild in fall. It gets a bit stormy. The leaves don't just come off because they drop off nicely. No, sometimes there's a massive storm and it's hailing, thunder and stuff. And then the leaves actually properly fall off. So you can't just get the leaves to fall off just by nice weather. You need some storms as well. So I think the wild woman is that time when you can embrace some of your emotional ups and downs as necessary, and some of your anger as a message And you may have to take a step back and go, I'm really angry. What is it I'm angry about? Is it really at the person I'm directing the anger at? Or is it because my need is not being met? Or is it because I'm changing and I don't want to do what I accepted before is not something I want to accept anymore? So that person is completely unaware that you've made that shit. So suddenly you're like, I'm not doing that. And they go, what? Last week you did. Because suddenly your wild woman is saying, actually, there's a boundary being crossed and I don't want to do this anymore. So then there comes a bit of wildness. And I think once you recognize that's what's happening, you can say, okay, hang on. I'm kind of cross with you, but I'm cross because I don't want to do this anymore. So therefore, so understanding and playing with that archetype of the wild woman who would sometimes like to just run around and go make a fire and abandon her whole family because she really doesn't care anymore, because she is meant to let go of some of those really heavy responsibilities. Doesn't mean she needs to leave them alone, but it does mean that she needs to let go of some of those burdens that she's carrying, because actually her children are getting older, or people will always step up. If you step back, and that's what it gets me a little cross as well, because if people get a serious illness, if they get cancer, suddenly everybody helps. And yeah, if you break your arm, suddenly other people will stand in because there is an obvious reason for it. Well, does there need to be an obvious reason apart from us saying, no, we would like you to help now? Thank you very much. I think you need a bit of wild woman, a bit of anger, a little bit of force and a bit of passion, because otherwise you will trip up.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
You know what that feels like, Laurie?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. I know, as I'm holding my arm up here because my fingers look like sausages. Yeah, it's so true that sometimes it feels like you need this physical symptom that people can see in order to say no and to have it be heard and respected. And there's just so much about the way our societies work that have women held under the proverbial patriarchy's thumb, that I think we get to this point in our lives and are feeling so much rage around being held down and being expected to be the good girl always and having to make nice. And the wild woman is a beautiful invitation to just say, fuck off to all of that. Maggie, did you have any thoughts you want to share about that, wild woman?
Yeah, I mean, I love this archetype. I always think of it as, once we're getting into our 40s, it's about this superwoman that we're stepping into. And it coincides with stepping into perimenopause, Uranus opposition. But it's really all about expanding our throat chakra. So think of your throat chakra expanding out and coming into that place where we can speak our truth and willing to say no and be unapologetic about it and being very selective of the things we say yes to. And cultivating this confidence as we step into this phase. It's all interconnected. And the wild woman, she takes a while to get into, but she starts around the 40s where she wants to come out. And as we start to listen more to her and actually give her what she wants, we can step into this full energy of who she is, which is all about having this clarity and honoring her own desire versus what society is telling her and any conditioning that's around it. And I feel like she loves herself fully, like all the parts of herself, because she's done the work. And she's very connected to her intuition and her wisdom that comes in, just like we talked about in the past of as we step into one phase, we may lose one thing, but we cultivate something new. And that wisdom and intuition is what comes through. And I think her whole energy is to inspire and empower other people and to play big. And she's willing to do it because she has all of that. She's fully embraced all that she is. And it's just such a beautiful thing to see when it shows up.
Aho, sister. And actually, speaking of, that is our last element to a successful roadmap to navigating perimenopause, which is sisterhood and community. And you can hear in the resonance in our voices, I think, how passionate we are about all of the things that we've been talking about, all of these different elements of this roadmap. And I think community is maybe saving the best for last, although, human design ranks right up there, but coming together with women who can see you and witness where you are in this transformative process, be able to empathize, be able to sympathize, and also to be able to empower one another, I think is key. And it feels to me like we are coming back around to the proverbial women's circle in so many different spaces. I'm seeing this pop up locally around me. A lot more women's circles are being hosted, but also women seeking out one another online and just being with like-minded women. And so, Johanneke, what do you think is the importance of community and sisterhood in this phase?
So there's different elements to that. Of course, there is the sharing, but I think there is also overcoming the witch wound, which is, there's more talked about this now, because there was a phase, for many years, for hundreds of years, where women were persecuted, for the fact of being a woman and being a little eccentric or doing things differently or having divorced, or I don't know, there's all sorts of reasons. It didn't really matter as long as women were suppressed, because they were deemed to be too dangerous by really the church. Even without going into the details, there is almost like an ancestral, there is like a collective consciousness around women being afraid of other women, because they were all they were set up against each other. Mm-hmm. And then lay over that the colonization and the patriarchy and the masculine systems that were out of balance, the femininity and the intuition and all of that had to go underground because it wasn't safe.
Right.
So a lot of us have still grown up with bitchy friendships and jealousy and the fact that we have to compete. So overcoming that by meeting with friends, but also more and more collaborating with other women and understanding human design helps us so beautifully to understand each other's uniqueness and our own uniqueness. And therefore there is nobody like you. So you're never competing. So women coming together, sharing their personal journeys, sharing without judgment and collaborating, is what we are doing, for example. But also bringing women together in safe spaces where there is an implicit understanding of each other's uniqueness, and therefore there is no judgment. There is simply support. If this is something that we can have a little contribution to make women feel safe, to share and to collaborate, then I think that's already changing the world. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'm very passionate about it, and I think it's a key pillar to a better humanity.
Mm-hmm. Love it. Maggie, do you have any thoughts?
I think when women come together, we all raise our vibration. Like, even for example, this past weekend, I was invited to a girls' Christmas get together, and the vibration in that room was just so uplifting and joyful. And there was laughter and there was support. Like-minded women coming together is so powerful. Mm-hmm. And it brings in this element of depth, like even the conversations that were happening. A lot of the times I find when we're at social gatherings, it may be more superficial, but in this case, with it just being all women and all in this mindset of supporting each other, we were able to dive into some really deep topics. And I think that that's really supportive. And in terms of what even we're creating, allowing women to come together talk about like-minded things, having that support with human design, but going deep into understanding perimenopause and what supports one versus the other, and learning from each other is so powerful. And I think that that's where we're headed in the future, is about bringing that back and supporting each other, but learning from each other.
Love that. Collective wisdom. Well, thank you so much for your thoughts on that and all of the other elements in our proposed roadmap here. And basically what we've given you in this episode are the different components of the roadmap. However, if you want to join us for our upcoming masterclass, that's really where we will show you how do you put all these things together to create something that works with you and the unique journey that you are on. So we are teaching this masterclass, and we will help you create a roadmap for yourself to navigate perimenopause. And so if you are interested in that, we have the masterclass up on Eventbrite. So please register there, and we will have the links available for you in the show notes as well. So to close, I just wanted to thank my lovely guests, Johanneke and Maggie, for joining us today. They are two of my favorite humans on the planet, and I hope that each and every one of you listening has the chance to meet them and be in their beautiful energy. And also just to send some love out to anyone who is in the throes of perimenopause and might be struggling with some of the symptoms that we've talked about. And we are encouraging you to use this as an invitation to rebel against the good girl and trade her in for the wild woman. And if you're not sure how to do that, then join us for the masterclass and we will show you how. So thank you again, ladies, for being here today.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Always fun when we get together.
Yes, it is.
And we get a little wilder whenever we get together. We get a bit more rebellious just from each other's energy. Like, yeah, let's do this.
This is so true. So true. All right. We can't wait to see you on the masterclass. Thanks for tuning in. Thank you so much for listening to Midlife by Design. I hope that today's episode gave you some things to think about in regards to navigating this perimenopausal insanity and having some really important elements that we feel make the perfect roadmap. So if you would like to create your own roadmap, then please join us for our masterclass on Sunday, January 5th at 11:30 Eastern Standard Time. The link is in the show notes and we can't wait to see you. Please do register soon because spaces are limited. And as we close, I'm sending you strength to release what no longer serves you, joy to fill your days, and clarity to fully be who you came here to be.